You've been watching live stream coverage of the United Nations 75th General Assembly. If you're just joining us, this is Uniting Business Live from the United Nations Global Compact in New York. I'm Veronica Pedroza, your host for the day. And you can follow all the action from the inaugural Global Impact Forum, right here and on social media using the hashtag Uniting Business. Now, for our next panel discussion, Target Gender Equality is raising the bar for corporate commitment and action to increase women's representation and leadership in business. Across the globe, women remain underrepresented in decision-making roles despite compelling evidence that women's leadership boosts business performance. Tackling gender discrimination effectively requires companies to recognize and address the multiple barriers to equality that women face based on race, ethnicity, class, religion, ability, sexuality, and other aspects of identity. Over the next hour, experts will discuss leading strategies to foster inclusion and ensure that corporate efforts to advance gender equality leave no woman behind. It's my pleasure to introduce to you Lee Jung-ok, Minister of Gender Equality, Republic of Korea, and Arantxa González-Laya, Foreign Minister, Spain. Now, Spain and the Republic of Korea are two of the 19 countries where Target Gender Equality is being implemented this year. So let's hear what the ministers themselves have to say about what's needed to accelerate the pace of change to advance gender equality locally.
Executive Director of UN Global Compact, Senda Ojambo, and honorable participant, it is with great pleasure to send you my warmest greeting from the Republic of Korea. It is a great honor to speak at this meaningful event hosted by the UN Global Compact. The UN Global Compact is carrying out diverse initiatives to promote corporate gender equality, and many Korean companies have joined the efforts as well. I believe that these initiatives are of great value given that gender equality as one of the most important global agenda is essential to companies because it increases women's participation in the labor force and also has an effect on corporate performance and national economic growth. We have already shared that gender equality has been targeted as a number 5 agenda in Sustainable Development Goal. It means gender equality is one of the critical aspects to be achieved to attain sustainability. Sometimes the value of gender equality has not evenly accepted because of different localities, ethnic backgrounds, and for other different cultural considerations. Our ministry has paid a due attention to awaken gender sensitiveness through formal and informal education and mutual learning processes. Gender equality should become local, national, and global agenda in this global community. Gender equality will promote social and cultural diversity, which has become one of the core values in this globalized world. Our ministry has set the goal to increase gender diversity and decrease gender gap, both in public and private sectors. Our ministry has tried to increase women's social, political, and economic representations, especially in public sector, through legislation and regulation during the last 2 decades. These days, we have integrated these efforts into private sector also. To improve corporate awareness and increase gender balance in corporate boards, the Ministry of Gender Equality and Family launched the Gender Balance Inclusive Growth Partnership Initiative, which is designed to increase voluntary participation by companies. To date, 82 companies have signed the voluntary pact, and going forward, the Ministry will work to expand the initiative targeting both large and small firms. Furthermore, Korea's amended Capital Market Act does not allow companies with total asset values at approximately $1.7 billion or more to form corporate boards with either male or female members only. Considering that the gender quota initiatives or other legal means adopted by other leading nations in gender equality proved effective, it is important to continue social discussions to reach a social consensus. In this light, the Ministry will continuously collect and disclose data on the status of corporate executives by gender to trace the on-site reality and changes. Meanwhile, gender equality in the workplace should be achieved together with gender equality at home in our day-to-day lives. According to the survey, which was conducted last year among 300 male and female managers, both men and women answered in unison that to break the glass ceiling, the most important policy should be the one aiming at promoting work-life balance. That's because more men can take paternity leave when there is no distinction of laws between men and women at home, and sharing care becomes normal. In addition, flexible and family-friendly corporate culture will lead to a sustainable growth where no men and women experience career interruption from childbirth and childcare. Therefore, it is crucial that companies and governments promote work-life balance through family-friendly policies. The prolonged COVID-19 crisis disproportionately affects women, causing greater distress in terms of care and employment. In response, our ministry provides a range of employment supporting through women's re-employment centers while offering companies with consulting programs to create or promote gender equal culture. It is also planning to expand its family-friendly certificate initiative designed to encourage companies to promote gender equality in the workplace. Please allow me to conclude my speech by congratulating on the opening of this meaningful event. I look forward to sharing active discussions and invaluable ideas to promote women's leadership and gender equality in this forum. Thank you very much.
My thanks to the Global Compact for your invitation to join you today. The United Nations Global Compact has a key role to play as a facilitator of public-private partnerships towards the achievement of the Agenda 2030 and the 10 principles of the Compact. Today, the call is for gender equality. We are fully committed to gender equality in all spheres, including in our foreign policy. We fully support the work of the UN Global Compact and its call for businesses to prioritize gender equality, including by setting ambitious targets for women business leadership. To date, close to 150 Spanish companies have signed the Women Empowerment Principles. You can count on our support as government to encourage more companies to join and work together to guarantee women's leadership and business, and to dismantle barriers that prevent women's full participation in the economy. I'm convinced that private and public sector partnerships are crucial to foster transformative change. We're all responsible for advancing gender equality and for building more fair and sustainable societies. Women are still underrepresented in companies' boards and business decision-making processes and have limited access to finance, to markets, and to equal pay. Facts and data support the need to put in place effective tools such as target equality. Important advancements have been made in women's rights and participation in the last 25 years. Access to education, parliamentary representation, or progressive laws in many countries have been adopted, but full economic participation is still pending. Since its creation, the Spanish local network of the Global Compact has been one of the first national platforms with the largest number of signatories, especially within small and medium enterprises. Spain's government supports the program Target Equality, along with national public policies and instruments. 42 Spanish companies have already joined the program. With these numbers, Spain has positioned itself as the country with the highest number of adhering entities. Let me also mention that 97% of the Spanish companies surveyed by the local network in Spain indicated that women are actively contributing to the company's response to COVID-19 and are included in decision-making. This figure is 10 points above the global average, making Spain one of the countries with the best data. Furthermore, Spanish companies are also taking measures to respond to gender-based violence in the context of COVID-19. We are actively participating in global initiatives to foster fair and inclusive societies through women's empowerment, the leadership of the Action Coalition on Economic Justice and Rights in the context of Generation Equality Forum, or the work towards a UN General Assembly resolution on women and girls in the response to COVID-19 are two examples of our leadership in specific and urgent actions, as is our recently adopted feminist foreign policy. Spain promotes economic laws and policies that drive transformative change and guarantee that social assistance and protection, as well as fiscal measures, are equally accessible to men and women. We are also taking steps to bridge the digital gender divide and to ensure equal pay for work of equal value. Finally, we are convinced that trade agreements and policies must include a gender approach, both in its definition and its application, and contribute to eliminating barriers on women's access to markets. The Spanish cooperation is also showing leadership in promoting SDG 5 in its partner countries. In conclusion, we believe gender equality in business and in the economy is a common goal and shared responsibility. Governments and private sector, together with other stakeholders, must work together to achieve major advancements in this field. And the Global Compact is a crucial partner. Opportunities exist and must be taken up quickly. It is a matter of economic justice and human rights. You can count on Spain's full support and engagement to walk this path together. Thank you very much.
Now let's hear from Dr. Musimbi Kanyoro, a UN Global Compact board member and senior global advisor to Target Gender Equality.
Greetings from Nairobi, Kenya. As a member of the United Nations Global Compact Board and senior global advisor to Target Gender Equality, I'm pleased to welcome you to Uniting Business Live, the premier gathering of companies committed to sustainable development at the 75th United Nations General Assembly. At the beginning of this year, global estimates suggested that it will take 257 years to achieve gender equality. With the onset of COVID-19 pandemic, research suggests that the global gender gap is widening rather than contracting, and more people are worried about it, and they should be. Among other things, the majority of jobs lost during the pandemic are those dominated by women, from garment manufacturing jobs in Bangladesh to retail and restaurant jobs in the USA. Many women also had to either juggle home care and a job or step away from their paid jobs, partially or fully, to care for their children as well as the elderly and the sick members of their families. Multiple barriers stand in the way to women's journey to gender equality. Of these, race stands out at this moment of our history. Women stereotyped negatively by race, many of them Black and Indigenous women, often are at the bottom of the job consideration, depriving them even the ability to give name and voice to the discrimination they suffer. When we support women leaders, companies must take into consideration all women. This includes women with disabilities, women of all races and all gender and sexual identification. Women will not achieve the inclusion we yearn for unless we recognize all our diversities. To advance gender equality, businesses must recognize and respond to the intersectionality layers of inequality faced by women around the world. We can turn the devastating events of COVID-19 into opportunity for change towards gender equality. Gender equality should be considered an asset essential to economic recovery and stabilizing and growing our societies into inclusive global communities. From the women who make up the majority of frontline workers in social services worldwide to the growing number of female heads of states who captured headlines by demonstrating incredible leadership during these uncertain times, the case for gender equality is stronger than ever for the world's recovery from the crisis. It's encouraging to see businesses and business leaders step up and recognize that gender equality is both a fundamental human right and a business imperative. To date, more than 3,500 global leaders have committed to the women's empowerment principles. Launched by the UN Global Compact and UN Women, the principles offer guidance to businesses on how to empower women in the workplace, marketplace, and communities where they operate. If your company has yet to join, I urge you to do so. The benefits will be multiple and plentiful. We must move faster if we are going to achieve sustainable development goals by 2030. We can't tackle climate change and food insecurity, create peaceful societies, or solve any of the world's most pressing challenges without the skills, talents, innovation, and leadership of women. It's critical that we unlock the power of women's leadership and decision-making talents across all sectors, including businesses, to build the world back better, stronger, and to do so together. This is why the UN Global Compact has launched Target Gender Equality Impact Initiative. Research shows that less than 30% of companies are setting concrete gender equality goals and targets to ensure progress and accountability. Running in 19 countries in collaboration with the UN Global Compact local networks, Target Gender Equality is challenging that. It is helping companies set and meet ambitious targets for women's representation and leadership. A key dimension of the program is a series of capacity building workshops that will provide participating businesses with the tools and knowledge to confidently set targets and create a plan for action. The workshops are being developed in collaboration with Catalyst, a global nonprofit with extensive experience working with companies across the world to accelerate progress for women in the workplace. The UN Global Compact is delighted to be partnering with Catalyst on the Target Gender Equality Program. I would also like to acknowledge the support of our patron supporters, PVH and Natura, as well as the Target Gender Equality Global Coalition, a network of over 30 UN partners and other organizations that stand united in calling for bold action and leadership to advance gender equality. I encourage you to visit Target Gender Equality Lounge to learn more about the work of the Global Coalition's organizations, as well as Global Compact local networks. Creating workplaces that are truly inclusive remains a key challenge, but a challenge that many are willing to accept and to address. And with that in mind, it's my pleasure to introduce Lorraine Harrington, President and CEO of Catalyst, who will lead today's panel. Lorraine, on behalf of the UN Global Compact, thank you for your partnership. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Musimbi, for that warm introduction. And I also want to thank Sanda and the UN Global Compact for putting this whole event together and for all of you joining today. Catalyst is excited to partner with the UN Global Compact's Target Gender Equality Initiative and the opportunity to scale its impact on advancing gender equality around the world. And for those of you who are not familiar with Catalyst, we are a global nonprofit working with some of the world's most powerful CEOs and leading companies to build workplaces that work for women. Founded in 1962, Catalyst continues to develop pioneering research and provide practical tools and provide solutions to build inclusive workplaces and drive change. And I'd like to echo the call to action for businesses to set targets and take bold action to advance gender equality. Creating workplaces that work for women requires cultural change that takes leadership, hard work, and intentionality. We're excited to be supporting the Target Gender Equality Initiative with best practices to help companies around the world make progress. Our conversation today is taking place during strange and uncertain times. The global COVID-19 pandemic has magnified inequalities, especially for women at all levels in the workplace. The International Labor Organization warns that some of the modest progress made on gender equality over the past decades we lost because women tend to work in the hardest hit sectors and shoulder additional unpaid care work at schools and daycare facilities remain completely or partially closed. Women of color around the world are being disproportionately impacted. Here in the United States, Black women face the largest job losses and their families face greater health risks. But according to the data from the UN Global Compact, 87% of companies report that women are actively influencing their company's COVID-19 response and are included at the decision-making tables. That is great news. And as the UN Secretary General has pointed out, we have a generational opportunity to build back better. A recent Catalyst survey found that 7 in 10 business leaders believe that workplaces will accelerate gender equality in the wake of COVID-19. Further, 8 in 10 business leaders think that the disruption caused by COVID-19 presents an opportunity to create a more inclusive workplace for people of color. At the same time, fewer than half of the working people think their companies are fully committed to creating an inclusive workplace where employees can thrive. We must work to reconcile this disparity and fully commit to build inclusive workplaces during this time of remote working and other changes as a result of the pandemic. So with that framing, I would like to introduce our panelists. First, we have Dr. Cindy Pace, who is the Global Chief of Diversity and Inclusion at MetLife, which is a large insurance company in the United States. We have Rebecca Miano, who is the CEO of the Kenya Electricity Generating Company, or KenGen, and Marcelio Bonilga, who is the Executive Director of the Global Compact Network in Mexico, and Danielle Sharif, who is the founder of Switch in Pakistan. But before we begin our conversation, I want to take a moment to give tribute and reflect on the life's accomplishments of Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg, a pioneer and champion for gender equality. She is a role model for all of us, showing us how one person's vision, intentionality, and dedication can change the world for good. Now I would like to open up the conversation, starting with you, Rebecca. Is business truly up to the challenge of building back better and more inclusively? Is tackling inequities viewed as a business priority by top leaders? Rebecca?
Thank you, and greetings from Nairobi, Kenya. And all over the world, women remain underrepresented in decision-making roles. It is estimated that women make up to less than 80% of Fortune 500 leaders. And in the case of Kenya, data shows that 12.8% of enterprises have gender-balanced boards, of which 12.6% have a female CEO. And this survey was done in 2019. And as more businesses get to understand that gender equality makes business sense and that it also adds economic value, more and more businesses are adopting tackling inequality as a business priority. And in terms of being up to the challenge, there is no excuse. I think all businesses that are running should be equal to the challenge. And all businesses have got the capacity to actually embrace this equality as a priority and also start taking steps, no matter how small, to get the capacity to embrace the inequality. And they must start closing the gaps. And speaking for myself, I consider equality, gender equality, as a top priority. And fortunately for me, I have the support of the board to do so. And whereas a lot of effort has gone into tackling inequalities, I'm sad to say that it is still not a priority across all businesses. And therefore, there is a lot of room for improvement all over. And so businesses should not focus on how much of a challenge it is or how difficult it is, but they should focus on how they can break it down into doable steps that can be executed, because the businesses and the advantages are enormous. And therefore, I want to submit that businesses are truly up to the challenge, and they must take tackling inequalities as a priority for every top leadership in a business.
Thank you, Rebecca. And I think you really highlight the fact that you can't just talk, you've also got to do action and take those hard steps. And that's why this initiative will provide the tools necessarily to really create action. And I'm glad to see that you are leading that within your organization and in Kenya. So Mauricio, what is the perspective from Mexico? What are you hearing from companies there? Is this pandemic heightening the awareness around gender equity? And do you think we have an opportunity?
Hi, Lori. Thank you very much. First of all, I would like to thank the opportunity to be sharing this space with this wonderful panelist. It's an honor to be sharing the space with such wonderful, great women. And well, from the Global Compact Network in Mexico, what we see, well, first, we're running with an enormous inertia from years of being very behind, behind in many aspects. Just to mention one of them, for instance, gender gap, apparently, gender pay gap is the largest or the worst, let's say, in Latin America. We're in the last place. So we're running we're facing difficult challenges, and we're running from far behind and battling this inertia. And what I can tell you is that companies are very interested in, and they're doing lots of things and moving things forward. And from just to give you one aspect of things we're doing is that, for instance, the Global Compact Network in Mexico partnered with the largest business chamber in the country to establish a working group of companies on subjects such as equal salary, economic participation, gender violence, work-life balance, and inclusivity. We're just starting off this working group, which is fantastic. The aim of this group is to become like the business community that drives gender equality in the country for the workplace in Mexico. So, and it's a multi-stakeholder group with over 60 participants, mainly businesses, but also international agencies, academics, activists, and government people. So we've had a wonderful, a big launch of this working group last week. And I'm mentioning this because this can be an indicator of what's happening in Mexico. There's not much, I mean, we have lots of things to work, and so the only, I mean, the movement, the pressure that is building it's a lot. But some experts mention, which is kind of difficult to understand, but experts mention that perhaps we need a generational change in Mexico that could be reflected up to 20 years from now to see the changes, no? So even though we are doing lots of things, there's a lot of interest from the companies, from the business sector to change things. It may take a lot of years, not a lot of years, but even up to 20 years to see big changes happening. So this is what I can tell you from my perspective.
Thank you for that update. And just a couple of comments. I think the multinational companies around the world that have major operations in Mexico can be real catalysts for this as well, because they're looking at their entire population. So I encourage you to involve them in all this because they have global targets that they're really driving. I'd like to go now to Danielle. And you have an amazing perspective working up and down the pyramid with young women entrepreneurs. And what is your perspective from Pakistan on this issue?
First of all, Lorraine, thank you so much for having me on this panel with all these amazing thinkers and change makers. So as far as Pakistan is concerned, unfortunately, we're not doing that well. I mean, when you talk about women's inclusion in work, we have one of the lowest rankings in the world. When you talk about women entrepreneurships, I think we are ranked 148 out of 149 countries, with only 1% of women making it into entrepreneurship. But interestingly enough, just like any other developing country, there are industries that are doing a lot better than others. So these are industries that are traditionally industries that working women are accepted in. So for instance, medical services, medicine. Pakistan produces one of the highest number of doctors in the world, where we also produce one of the highest number of female doctors in the world. Education is another sector where a lot of Pakistani women choose to become teachers, instructors, right? But when we look at industries like tech or oil and gas or finance or banking, all of these industries are industries that need a lot of work, right from the leadership down to the very grassroots level. So just to give you an idea, for instance, I'm a tech entrepreneur, and they're only, double digit. I can count them on my hand, the number of female tech entrepreneurs in the country. Things are changing. They're definitely changing, given that we are also right next to India and Bangladesh, who are doing much, much better in terms of women's inclusion in work than Pakistan is. But it's slow. And I think this is where a lack of women leadership also comes in, where we need more positive female role models in the country. We also need more positive women business owners and entrepreneurs who can actually inspire the next generation of girls to, become change makers.
Well, Danielle, thank you. And also thank you for being such a great role model in Pakistan. It really makes a big difference. And I spent my career in Silicon Valley as a woman in tech, starting many moons ago. It wasn't that great either, and it still isn't. So we've got a long way to go all around the world, especially in the tech sector. I'd like to now turn to Cindy to, you're right. Cindy and MetLife is a big supporter of Catalyst and has been a leader in gender equity and done great things within their organization. So I'd like your perspective on what it takes to in corporations to make progress and to set targets in place. Tell us about what you're doing.
Thanks, Lorraine, and it's a pleasure to be part of this panel. The thing about MetLife is we are a US-based company, however global, operating in over 40 markets and serving over 100 million customers. So it's an imperative for us as part of our business strategy that we focus on gender diversity and equity. And so one of the things that, and you know this, Lorraine, from all the research that Catalyst has done, is the tone has to be set at the top. The commitment, the accountability has to come from the top. People have to see what leaders are doing. So this year, in our effort to really leapfrog and move forward our efforts in advancing gender equality, we partnered with the UN Global Compact. We're a signatory of the UN Global Compact as well as WEPS. And we partnered with them and UN Women to say, not only will we be committed to the women empowerment principles, we are committed to addressing our strengths as well as gaps that we may have. And so we had over 40 leaders in our markets, our country managers, supported by our CEO and our executive group, commit to focusing on gender equity. And what we've done to date is not only did we sign the commitment, it's about getting into action. We are in the process right now. These 40 markets are using the Women Empowerment gender analysis tool to really understand, where do we stand around leadership? What are we doing in terms of workforce that's working? Are there gaps? What about our marketplace as well as the community? So those 4 areas actually aligned to the D&I corporate strategy. And those are the areas that we're looking at to see, what do we need to do? Not only are leaders doing this, but we are engaging our community of women, our women's business networks that want to be part of this. So we've brought in Aude Cocatrix to come in and talk about why is it important that women understand the SDG goal number 5, and what can we do internally through our programming to engage everyone. So number 1, I would say in closing, is to be very visible about the commitment. Our signing of the WEPS this year, we did that as part of the International Women's Day celebration, letting everyone know what we were committing to so we could be held accountable and what the next steps are going to be. Secondly, not just bringing these 40 different leaders together and saying, okay, we're going to engage in some analysis and understanding what's going on from a numbers perspective, but taking action. And so our next phase of taking action is pulling together a small group. We called it our gender equity team, that's really going to help us come up with recommendations that MetLife can make. And we're going to make sure it's specific to region, specific to the local markets. Because one thing is, when you're a global company, the commitment can be global, but the way that we go about the change has to make sense within the countries, within the regions and communities that we serve. So that's just a little bit of what we're doing, and we look forward to doing more.
Cindy, that's a terrific story. Intentionality and commitment at the top, a real action, focused on targets and understanding your numbers and putting plans in place. I think there's a lot we can learn from what you're doing. I'd like to now turn to Rebecca, who is a CEO, woman CEO running a major company, and understand how she's attacking all this.
Thank you. And it is a pleasure to share how I'm tackling this issue and what businesses need to do in order to progress is to come up with policies that will support the development of women. These policies have to be intentional and well thought out. And then, in accordance with the policies, put in place programs that will have targets in order to enhance the participation of women. And of course, this has to be supported from the top. training women and giving them the skills and the resources required is really critical, because how else will they compete for these jobs, for these businesses? And so we have to equip women. And I want to give an example here at Kengen. In 2016, we realized that being a technical company, a power generating company, very male dominated, women were then to be seen less motivated, less happy, less senior, less participatory. I would say less of everything. And with the support of the board, we did come up with a forum that we named Pink Energy. And this forum has helped women to have the awareness, to also have personal development, build up their confidence. And we started improving even the operating environment, the sheer facilities to assist women. And I'm glad to report that this has been embedded in Kengen's strategy, and we have targets. I am happy to report that we have made tremendous achievements and success using the Pink Energy. And earlier this year, despite the COVID pandemic, we did conduct a survey to look at the situation now compared to the baseline in 2016. And the satisfaction of the women had just gone up several decimal points. And that is a very good achievement. We have seen a lot more women being promoted, a lot more women presenting themselves to compete for jobs, and even vying for elective positions in their professional bodies. And when I look back, I feel very gratified that we have made tremendous success, but we have a lot more to do. And one of my personal commitments is to move Pink Energy not to cover only Kengen, but the whole of the energy sector, and eventually even many more sectors in this country. And so I am delighted to share this story in this panel and to continue to do more for this great agenda that we have.
Well, Rebecca, that is a really inspiring story, and it's measurable. It took understanding of where the women are and where you wanted to get them to. And I also love the your background with Pink Energy right there that I see. So thank you for sharing that great story. I would like now to move on to ask Danielle. You know, it's one thing to talk about people who are working in these large companies who, you know, have a lot of advantage, but we really want to make change regardless of race, religion, disability, socioeconomic background, and all the dimensionalities. So, you know, can you talk about that and, you know, how we can affect change broadly?
So I think one thing that a lot of us forget when we're talking about women and gender equality is that, you know, as it is infamously said, women's rights are human rights and human rights are women's rights, right? So we have to look at the broader picture here. I think when it comes to inclusion, we have to actively reach out to the disenfranchised. Especially in developing markets where you know, women may not have access to transportation. Women are fighting massive, huge gender pay gaps and stuff, right? The way you hire has to change. For small companies like us, I'll give you an example. So what we basically do is we create apps, audio and text apps for non-smartphone users in developing markets. And a lot of these services are content-based services. So quite a few, actually a large number of my team works out of remote areas in Pakistan, and these are women. But if we had advertised job vacancies in newspapers or on internet portals, or if we had gone through headhunters, we would have never found these women. So you have to build HR strategies, hiring strategies that can actually reach out to these women, right? Reach out to their communities, reach out to, vocational training centers and see. So that is one thing that I think we need to change. Secondly, on a broader level, I think what we can work on is how we define business success. So for us right now, for a lot of big corporations and even for small businesses, success is a profit and a numbers game right now, right? We don't measure success in how the growth of your how your team is growing, or how well they're doing otherwise, or how many change makers or leaders you're producing within the teams, right? And this is where I think women can play a critical role. The way we define success, especially in entrepreneurship, especially in small business ownerships, I think that can definitely change the game here.
Well, thank you for your insights. And those are really great examples. Being more flexible in your hiring practices, I think, is critical. I also think there's a great opportunity as we build back better and look at all the skilling and reskilling we're going to have to be doing coming out of this pandemic to give everyone a chance to move forward. So Mauricio, what is your perspective on this? Because you're dealing across the whole population in Mexico.
Thank you, Lorraine. Well, speaking from the perspective of a global compact network, I can mention or remind that the importance of companies participating within the Target Gender Equality Initiative that we have, the Global Impact Initiative, which is a wonderful way for identifying where you are, exactly where you're located on these aspects, your strengths and the actions that you should take. So I believe that the women empowerment principles are a great analysis tool. This is something that, as mentioned previously, that companies should make use of it, and also, as we say in Mexico, tropicalize it to your own context in the local countries. And so use the web's analysis tool. Also, Target Gender Equality is a coaching platform, so you get some coaching as well, and companies get to set ambitious targets and realistic targets as well, and I guess this is another tool that it's coming up from this the initiative is the peer-to-peer connection and to share experiences, which is fantastic. I mean, from the perspective in Mexico, we're seeing almost 30 companies joining Target Gender in Mexico, so there's a great interest in it, and hopefully over or near 30. Well, we're going to have nearly 50 companies now joining the webs in Mexico. So it's moving, it's pushing, things are moving. And I believe this is a great way to change things. So I have to make the commercial. Sorry.
Well, I want to say that these initiatives with the right lens on really looking for equity, not just equality, but equity in hiring practice and all the different things that will bring everyone along is what is really needed. And I think the work that you're doing is enabling that. And that gets really to my next question to Cindy. Catalyst has done research on the emotional tax of people who are underrepresented in population, that they feel like the only in the group, and they therefore have to be on guard around biases, and it affects their well-being, it affects their retention, and it reflects their productivity. So, building inclusive cultures that really address the intersectionalities of people across their identity is really critical. So Cindy, let's talk about what you think is needed by organizations to really build inclusive cultures.
Thank you, Lorraine. Actually, just piggybacking on what Mauricio just said, the importance of peer networks and building greater connectedness is extremely important to inclusion. So one of the things, or actually two of the things that we've been doing to address this is we have a campaign and a learning program called Inclusion Begins With Me. And as part of that program, we have created communities where people can come together and talk about a variety of topics under the program, from valuing differences to ownership and belonging. How do you show up as an ally? How do you deal with biases and microaggressions? And what we found is creating these safe spaces, these safe havens for conversation and questioning. You know, people want to have these opportunities to get to know each other, but also to share. What we realize in the wake of COVID and the racial and civil unrest happening within the United States and around the world is people wanted to talk. They wanted to talk. People wanted to know that folks cared about them. So the second thing that we did, we ran the Inclusion Begins With Me campaign on Tuesdays. We called it Inclusion Tuesdays. And then on Wednesdays, we ran something called Be Well. And Be Well is still a program that's running. Be Well is about supporting the well-being of our colleagues. And so through our benefits program, we are providing resources, tools for people to be able to manage stress and anxieties that come about, whether it's racially or emotionally based. We give them the tools that they need to be successful at work. It's not enough to have, targets and be looking at gaps and not really understand what it takes for people to fully thrive. So we see wellness as a huge component in driving a more equitable and inclusive workplace.
Well, those are just such great programs, and they really get to a key learning coming out of COVID-19, which is around empathy and how important it is to really understand where people are and what's needed for them to move forward. Rebecca, I think, also gave a great example how her whole program, really started with empathy. So, I mentioned at the very beginning that, one of my inspirations is the notorious RBG. And so I thought I'd end by asking each of you to tell us about someone who's really inspired you around women's equality. So Cindy, let's start with you.
I would have to say my mother. My mother was, for me, the role model and the first woman I saw in a corner office. She is a retired educator and was one of the youngest at one point elementary school principals. And to see my mom command that space and, to your point, show empathy and caring for her, for the students, for the parents, for the community. I was learning without even knowing that I was learning. So I would say she is the first woman that ever inspired me.
Well, thank you. Mine too. My mother was a psychologist in the 70s and went back to work after she had children. So, mothers are, always an inspiration to start with. So Danielle, you've done so many amazing things. What inspired you to become an entrepreneur and move ahead and do all the things you've done at such a young age?
So I think I draw a lot of my inspiration from Dame Stephanie Shirley, also known as Dame Steve Shirley. So I don't know how many of us have heard of her, but she's one of the most amazing tech entrepreneurs in the 60s. She set up her own company in Britain at a time in the 60s when just for a woman to open a bank account, she needed a husband's permission. And this was a tech company that ended up doing programming for Concord's black box. And it was a company run by women with over 9,000 women freelance programmers. So we're talking about the 60s here, right? So I think, and she's someone who basically, when I look at her journey, I see very much where, women in Pakistan's journey is right now, especially in cutting edge industries like tech, for instance, where to me, she taught me resilience, first of all. And secondly, she taught me that if you have to get somewhere in life as a woman and achieve something, you cannot self-victimize. You have to accept the fact that, yes, you're a woman, the odds will mostly always be stacked against you, right? And if a man has to work 100%, you will have to work 200% to get it. So be ready, accept it, rather than being like, I'm a victim, I can't do this, so odds are stacked against me, rather than creating, having that mindset shifted to one of a fighter. So I would have to say that Stephanie Shirley would be it for me.
Well, those are great words of wisdom for all of us. Resiliency, grit, I totally agree with everything you're saying. And Rebecca, who inspired you to be able to be this great woman leader in Kenya?
Thank you. It's quite difficult to pick only one person because I'm always surrounded by very phenomenal women. I'm a product of great mentors, role models, and coaches. Here in Kenya, I'll mention a lady, Esther Koimet, who I have followed through my life, and Margaret Kobia, Professor Margaret Kobia, currently the CS for Gender. But in the international community, the CEO of IMF, Kristalina Georgieva, during the role as the CEO of the World Bank, she committed the bank to gender equality within its own ranks. And she set the target for women to occupy 50% of senior management, and that was to be achieved by the year 2020, but that was achieved ahead of time in 2018. And then during her first address as IMF CEO, she vowed to fight for greater gender equality at the global lender and around the world. And she told a packed audience, buckle up, it is going to come. And she spoke openly about her battles, her scars after decades in the international institutions. But one of the things that makes me remember her and get inspiration, she visited Kenya and also visited my company. And we all know that she could not hide her joy when she realized a power utility in this country is led by a woman. And she cheered me on forever. I still look at her photos and the joy and the encouragement she gave me. That will last me a very, very long time. And therefore, I honor her among all those other phenomenal women.
Thank you. That's a great story and a wonderful person to admire. And Mauricio, can you top this? You've got a lot of great stories. We've already.
Yeah, I have some Mexican women on my mind, and what I can say is that I admire their energy and nonstop push for equity, and never missing an opportunity to pointing out when things go the other way. And as they said before, it's difficult to pick one woman in particular, but I think of a Mexican writer and a Mexican writer called Rosario Castellanos, and I remember a phrase she was saying after listening to you. I remember a phrase from her, which says, "Well, every day a woman wins a battle for the acquisition and conservation of her personality." No? She was, and she's actually quite an inspiration for women in Mexico as well. So I would say Castellanos.
Well, thank you all for those candid and heartfelt remarks. I just want to close by saying that I appreciate everyone who's come to this panel, who signed up to be part of the Target Gender Equality Initiative, and that we are all here to make progress around this really critical issue around gender equality around the world. And your participation in this initiative and really doing actionable change is going to make a difference for everyone. So thank you all for your time.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Lorraine, and all the panelists. It's time for a plenary break for the next hour. There are several breakout sessions to attend, including a guided networking session, new trends stemming from the COVID-19 pandemic. Please also visit our expo area. We have sponsor studios with live sessions, as well as videos highlighting their sustainability work. Our Target Gender Equality Lounge features live sessions and videos from over 30 partners and Global Compact local networks from all around the world. The UN Global Compact Academy has highlights of webinars that have happened this past spring and summer. Finally, you can also use the networking tab to connect with your fellow attendees on video chats. So, see you in an hour.